Due to the graphic nature of this program, viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to today's broadcast. It's the Thursday, July 9th, 2026 episode of the Marco Dure Show, the only show where the facts are facts and hard truths thrive. While there is lots to discuss with you today, ladies and gentlemen, I want to start today's show letting you know that the off-ramp to this war with Iran is now over, and we're going to begin to see this war escalate as time goes on. And as a result, our economy will continue to struggle as we see inflation rise, we see growth beginning to drop, and the scarcity continue to worsen in the upcoming months. There's no way around this. There's no other time in history, by the way. There's no other exemplar I could point to where we have had a position like the one we're in right now, where we have a global choke point of the world supply of things such as oil, liquefied natural gas, helium, urea, aluminum, sulfur, you name it, being shut off to such a degree, closing off such a great amount of the global demand for these different feedstocks. And they're not moving as they ought to be. And the ramifications of these decisions will be traumatic for very many people, not just here inside the United States. Now, I've tried to warn you. I've given you all the available facts that I collect, the research I hear, yet no one in the Trump administration really seems to acknowledge or even be concerned that we are standing at the precipice of economic collapse right now, which, by the way, will put Republicans in a very, very difficult position to keep both the House and the U.S. Senate come this November in our midterm election cycle, which should be our number one focus right now. Not a war in Iran or restarting a war with Iran. But let's delve into what's actually happening right now. I want everybody to know exactly what's going on with this war and what we can expect come later on as a result of this. This comes from the Associated Press, though. And I want to fill you in as to what's going on. The United States launched new airstrikes against Iran early on Thursday morning, and Tehran decided to respond by targeting the U.S.-allied Mideast countries in an exchange of fire that threatened an interim deal intended to help end the war in the Middle East. Now, this is foolish on so many different accounts, ladies and gentlemen, that we decided to restart this. As you know, I'm no fan of all this. We decided in one instance to hit the Bashir nuclear power plant. We decided to strike radars, of which are put at this facility right now. And I want to make one more thing very clear with this. During the strikes last June, if you'll recall, in June of 2025, we didn't hit the Bashir plant. We hit Fordo, Isfahan, Natanz, because we felt that they were holding this nuclear technology there, obviously the enriched uranium, if you will. But we didn't hit Bashir. And the reason why we probably didn't hit Bashir was because there are actually Russian scientists that work on this site. And if we killed Russian scientists inside of Iran, that would obviously be an act of aggression towards the Russian government, which we obviously do not want. So I want to make that very, very clear to you. But we also struck up here in Sharik, on the coast of Iran. We also hit the Belt and Road Initiative Railway, which I've spoken with you many times about. This is on the Turkmenistan border, which goes into China. So this is a railway built by the Chinese that have allowed land travel, land transportation to continue to operate when we see this blockade around the Persian Gulf and all the war that's going on as a result of this. So really, Trump is going after, what it appears to me, he's going after the transportation energy sector routes. That's what he's looking at right now. Now, there is talk of taking Kark Island as well, which I think is a completely terrible idea. He hasn't bombed Kark Island. He hasn't said anything about taking it again, rather than just kind of off the cuff telling you we may take Kark Island again. I don't think he'll do that. Likely sending troops onto Kark Island with really no supplies or a way to get access to them. Possibly even having the Iranians either attack them or take them hostage would just be a completely bad look for President Trump. He doesn't want that. And so we have this kind of back and forth going on. The Iranians decided to strike 3 times in Bahrain, where they actually struck the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters, which cost the United States some $400 million. Also striking with missiles various targets in both Kuwait and Qatar as well. And by the way, this one is a little bit new, but the sirens sounded Thursday afternoon in Jordan and as well, where we know some of these missiles were intercepted, where the U.S. has stationed troops and aircrafts as well. So this is expanding. The range and scope of this conflict is beginning to expand. I've been told, despite what I've read in some of these articles, that they're getting much more intense. Obviously, they've struck 2 bridges inside of Iran as well. We don't know if they're completely inoperable or what has taken place, but Trump is going after the transportation infrastructure inside of Iran now. So we're upping the ante just a little bit, but what I've been told is that the strikes are not as devastating as the ones previously when this war first began. And of course, I believe the Iranians will really begin to shut down that Strait of Hormuz now. That could be a possibility. Only time will tell if they decide to do such a thing. But we know they're not obviously happy with this resuming of the conflict, especially during the funeral processions and ceremonies for the slain Ayatollah Khamenei. That's obviously not going to make the Iranians very happy, as one could imagine. But I do want to say this to you as well. As we go back and forth with the Iranians, we strike this target now, we strike that target, we've threatened to hit their desalinization plants. We have to understand one thing here. The younger generations in Iran, let's call them the millennials, right? The millennials who are, 46 and under. The Gen Zers, and even the younger generation, what is it? The Gen Z, what is it? Gen Y? I don't even know. Gen Alpha, I think is what it is. Okay. I think it's like 12 and under is Gen Alpha right now. This group of young people, they haven't seen the scope of war like this inside their own country. They just haven't seen another country attack them like this before. Now, the older generations certainly have seen this. They went to war with the Iraqis because we decided to supply Saddam Hussein with money, support, weaponry, chemical weapons. Some 70,000 Iranians were killed in that war. Civilians, I should say. Anywhere from 300,000 to 500,000 total dead Iranians. So that generation and the older generations understand the scope of this. They see the extent of what the United States can do and will do to get what they want. We obviously weren't happy that we decided to remove the Shah, the revolution, who was playing ball with the United States. So, again, we can criticize the Iranian government all we want. We could do that all day long. It doesn't matter. But what does matter is we now find ourselves in this standoff with the Iranians yet again. And now we have a younger generation that is going to become more radicalized as a result of this. So we decided during the funeral processions of the slain Ayatollah that we helped assassinate, along with Israel. Now this generation sees what the United States is capable of doing. And that's why you have so many people, millions of people in the streets right now. Again, this is one of the largest gatherings, certainly for a funeral, in the world, is the Ayatollah Khamenei right now. That's a big statement. That says something. It certainly does away with the myth, of course, that the Ayatollah is not popular, that the Iranian people want to rise up against their government and take it over. None of that's taken place. If that were true, even if that were remotely true, you would have seen something happening right when the U.S. and Israel struck on February the 20th. We didn't see that. There was no uprising. In fact, the people that did the uprising later on, before that whole took place, was during the protests for the economy, when we decided to crush the rial. And there were protests in the street as a result of the high inflation that was taking place. There were peaceful protests taking place because of that. Now, we were, of course, told that the Iranian government came in, they decided to machine gun people, kill. Trump decided, I guess the other day, say it was 54,000. I don't know where he gets those numbers from. The real number is 3,117. And before you say, geez, Dre's, that's horrible. Now, normally I would agree with you, of course, except the fact that the Iranian police, the IRGC, were not going up against peaceful Iranian protesters over the economy. Quite the opposite. Scott Bessent admitted to this. Trump later admitted to this as well. That we supplied the Kurds, the Mujahideen al-Khalqs, the Baluchis, some of the other Arab factions inside of Iran, with this weaponry at the behest of a female Mossad agent who was coordinating the whole thing. Yeah, she was running what was going on. And the Iranians later figured this out because they were able to confiscate cell phones from some of these violent rioters. And they found this technology, found the videos on their phones, said, oh, okay, this makes sense now. That's why they shut off the internet. And once that communication was cut, there was no more riots. Isn't that interesting? So that 3 to 4 days, Trump wants you to believe that the Iranian government was machine gunning its own people over protest of the economy, of which they started too, by the way. We did all that. But that didn't happen. These violent rioters were setting vehicles on fire, buildings on fire. They were attacking military bases. They were attacking police. They were setting police on fire. And yes, innocent people were killed in the crossfire of all this going on, this chaos in the streets of which we were totally behind. But I said to myself, if this was remotely true, if the Iranian government really did decide to go in and suggest that, yes, they will go and machine gun innocent people protesting the economy, would they really have, after they shut down the hijacking of the peaceful protest with these violent rioters, would President Pezeshkian really march with them? And would they march alongside of them? Would that make any sense to anybody listening? So in other words, if we had something in the United States where, obviously this wouldn't happen, but let's say we had one of our leaders was behind something like that in the United States where lots of people were killed, would we really walk alongside that person in the protest after that? Of course you would. You'd be up in arms about that, and rightfully so. So why would President Pezeshkian actually march with the people afterwards if he and his government were responsible for that? It wouldn't happen. Let me tell you something else. Again, that totally negates this whole idea that the Iranians have killed 54,000 of their own people. In mid-February, they had a national rally day inside of Iran. The Ayatollah called out people all over the country to come out. Inside Tehran alone, they got 4 million people out on national rally. This is just to support your government. And inside Tehran, at least 4 million people were out in support of the government, just in Tehran. That's not including the entirety of the whole country. Can you imagine that if we had that in the United States, if we had a national rally day around our government, how many people would actually show up to that? I don't even think in a country of 340 million people we can get 4 million, to be honest with you, that support the government, especially in that way. So you got to ask yourself the question, would innocent people be allowing Pezeshkian to protest with them after this so-called incident took place over the 3 or 4 days in early January? And in mid-February, would 4 million people just in Tehran alone that would obviously have witnessed this, would they really go out and support the government like that? Would you have people now standing on bridges to prevent the United States from blowing it up? Would you really go ahead and do that? Or would there be a massive uprising to it? I think obviously the situation speaks for itself, folks. I don't believe that the Iranian government just shot innocent people. I don't believe that. Certainly the information I've been getting from independent sources that have been on the ground in Iran, that have spoken to people, that have looked at the documentation, that have gone through all 3,117 people that have since deceased in this entire conflict. Again, you have police officers that were set on fire. You have people that were killed in all of this. You had people attacking military bases. Strife in the streets to no end. because of what we were trying to do with our CIA, the Mossad, MI6, of course, had to get a piece in there as well. And once that was all shut off, all that communication, everything just stopped, folks. If there was this upheaval by the people, if the people were so fed up with their government, why would it stop all of a sudden? Again, they were armed. Why would it stop? Because the communication got shut off. That's why it all ended. And again, the other people were arrested. Some people have been since executed. They're saying, oh my God, look at, they're executing their own people for protesting. Well, folks, again, show me someone who was an innocent protester for just that purpose that has been executed. Would the Ayatollah have, again, upwards of 20 million people showing up to his funeral if he was responsible for doing that? Can you imagine that happening? And by the way, I come with receipts. People that I've listened to their work, I've read their work, they've seen this documentation, they have been on the ground. They circumvent the mainstream news media. They come in and they figure out this is what actually happened. When I talk to people, this is what they saw. When I look at the documentation in Tehran, every dead body has a Iranian national ID next to that person. They have the numbers, the real numbers. 3,117 was the actual number. But why are they telling us this? Why keep fomenting that they're killing, and the number just keeps getting more and more? First it was 10,000, then it was 15, then it was 20, now it's 54,000. And I find it interesting. They tell us the number of dead inside of Gaza is around that number right now. Now, real estimates estimated to be at least 100,000, probably 200,000. If you go through the people that are probably under this rubble. When you have 85% of the territory lie in ruins, I would imagine it would be much higher, of course. But I want you to think about that for a second. In 4 days, 3 to 4 days, the Iranians' machine gun just as many people as the Israelis have in Gaza in 2.5 years, dropping bombs on every one of these villages and cities. It's an amazing feat, folks. I got to tell you, it's amazing. 54,000 people in 3 days, 3 to 4 days. Remarkable, really. It is, if you want to believe that. This is all set in motion to get you to want to approve this war, to so-called finish the job, whatever that job may be. We don't even know what that means anymore. What does finish the job mean? Regime change? Just blow up the country? Make it obsolete? What is the end game of this? We don't know. Well, we've never been told a real objective of how this war should end or what winning looks like, despite what you heard from President Trump time and time again. Now, I do want to play you a little bit of President Trump. He has been asked some questions, certainly about where this war is going, what should be happening. I played this for you yesterday, but I do want to play this for you again. I want to break this down for you to understand exactly what I mean when I tell you this is all completely off the cuff. Let's listen to clip 1.
Fire over. Is the ceasefire done? Is the MOU dead?
It's a very interesting question. To me, I think it's over. I don't want to deal with them anymore. They're scum. You know what scum is? They're scum. They're sick people. They're led by sick people. And they're vicious, violent people.
So they're vicious, violent people. They're scum. Yet we were the ones that went in and assassinated the head of the state. When was the last time this happened, by the way, where we saw another country take out a head of state in this manner? And we're talking about them being violent? It was us that armed the Kurds and the Baluchis and what have you. Not the Iranian government. By the way, the Iranians, the government itself in Iran, the last time they invaded any other of their neighboring countries was in 1789, the year we ratified the U.S. Constitution, folks. That's the last time Iran went to war or invaded any other country around them. Again, I bring you the facts. I don't bring you how I feel about certain things. Those are the facts. So we talk about there's scum, there's sick people. I don't want to negotiate. I think it's over. Again, this is Trump just off the cuff deciding what he wants to do. Is it over? Maybe it's over. Maybe it's not over. Who knows? Maybe he'll decide later on that he wants it to be back on and have it work again. We don't know. We don't know. This is classic Trump. But let's listen to clip 2 now so we get a better understanding of where he sees this going.
We just hit him very hard. And I say we hit them 20-1. Every time they hit us, we're going to hit them 20. And we did it last night. It did a little something today, but it was really retribution for last night. They hit actually 3 boats, not 2. And when they hit, we hit back much harder.
Are we returning to full-scale military conflict, sir?
I don't know. I don't know. We'd win it very quickly. It's another way.
We'll win it very quickly. Well, that doesn't sound right, does it? We'll win it very quickly. By the way, we'll hit them 20-1. So every one target they hit, we'll hit 20. Well, they just hit 85 of our targets in the region. They hit inside Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, now Jordan. So 85 different targets. So we should hit 20-fold of that. We didn't hit that. We only hit 80 targets. So again, it's classic Trump coming out and saying, well, we'll do this, we'll do that. Really, there's no planning, there's no strategy whatsoever. And as we do this, we deplete more and more of our stockpiles. Just thought I'd share that with you. All right, let's talk about, though, the Strait of Hormuz. That's the most important part about this. The whole thing's about the Strait of Hormuz, by the way. Which to me is ridiculous because we had an opportunity to get it opened back up. And we decided, I guess, to blow all that up on our own, figuratively speaking, of course. This comes from the BBC. It says, traffic through the Strait of Hormuz has fallen steeply after a series of tit-for-tat strikes by the U.S. and Iran followed an attack on 3 tankers earlier this week. Now, before all this took place, the other day, just 23 tankers and cargo ships crossed over the critical Gulf waterway on Wednesday. That'd be yesterday, of course. And that was down from 47 a week before. So we're seeing the traffic really not meeting the pre-war levels, of which it was roughly around 138 to 140 ships crossing through the strait each day. So we're nowhere near where we need to be, which is why I told you 95% of the regular traffic in the last 4 months has been completely null and void. It just hasn't happened. We haven't received those levels of traffic to come through the strait again to move on their way, to get goods to go where they need to go. It's not happening. It's not happening. But why did this all happen? Trump says because they struck these 3 vessels. One of them was that Qatari liquefied natural gas tanker that luckily simply caught fire just from the drone hitting it, didn't sink the ship and didn't catch fire completely. But listen to this. Even the BBC admits this, which I'm shocked, by the way. They said 3 ships that were struck this week were using a U.S. recommended route through Omani waters. Now, Iranians have said that the only safe route through the strait is a separate route through its own waters. So again, there's the Iranian side and there's the Omani side. But I had to laugh when I read this because, ladies and gentlemen, if you read through the Memorandum of Understanding, which Trump signed his name to, by the way, so either he didn't read it, he didn't understand what he was reading, or he's now ignoring what he signed his name to. It said that the Strait of Hormuz will reopen within 30 days of signing this document. Okay, that took place. They opened it right away. It was open for business. But it also said for the next 60 days, there will be no fee system in place, so you're free of tolls to travel through. But the last part was the key. It said all arrangements of traveling through the Strait of Hormuz will coordinate with the Iranians. They will be the ones in charge of the traffic. So in other words, if you wanted to travel through, you worked with the Persian Gulf Strait Authority. They have a website now. You would fill out the documentation, you fax it in, you would then coordinate with the Iranians, and then they would guide you through the strait on their side. Of course, that's where they wanted ships to travel through. And by the way, there are mines all throughout the Persian Gulf as well now through that strait, that 21-mile opening. So do you really want to just travel through wherever you deem you would like to travel? Something tells me you wouldn't want to do that. There's nothing in that section that says, and the United States will also help coordinate ships, escort them through, decide where they're going to go, when they're going to go through. That's not what the deal said. So why is the U.S. involved in this at all, and why are other ships following what the United States said after the warning by the Iranians? Let that sink in for a second. Why do we do this? Why are we involved in this? It's the Iranians that will control the Strait. So I don't know if this is Trump coming in and saying, look what we can do. We'll decide where ships go. And at the same time, the Iranians are saying, you follow what we're saying, or we will beat you with some sort of resistance, which they did. That's why they struck that Omani vessel. The other two vessels they struck ended up turning around and not traversing. But this didn't need to happen. I think that's my main point about all this. This did not need to happen. Why is the U.S. encouraging other vessels to go through the Omani corridor? Again, escalating this to the point at which now the Iranians have struck a vessel. Didn't have to happen. And I said this on yesterday's show, I'll say it to you again. Can you name me any ship, any vessel that has been working with the Iranian government that filled out the proper form, that is using the TSS, right, the traffic separation scheme that tracks and monitors where these vessels go? Has any vessel that's done that been attacked? And the answer is no. So the problem lies with the United States. The United States got involved and decided to escort ships through the Omani side, which the Iranians said, you are not going to do. Yes, you can utilize our side. Yes, you can coordinate with us, and we'll get you through it. But you'll follow what we're telling you. Otherwise, you will be met with some resistance. And that's what took place. And then Trump used that as a position to say, okay, now we're going to continue to resume our bombing on Iran. It's stupid. It's foolish. It didn't have to happen. That's the part they leave out to you time and time again. It wasn't just that the Iranians just decided to strike 3 vessels. They were defying what the Iranians were saying because, again, in the future, I said this before, the Iranians will control what comes in and out of the Strait of Hormuz. That's the future of the Strait. So they're really just getting everybody in line. Hey, you want to travel through this? You're going to travel through our side of the Strait. We are controlling this. Now, you'll get through free of charge right now. Don't get used to that, by the way. But they decided to defy it. This is what happened. And now this is now the new pretext, I guess, for starting the war again. Now we're seeing that traffic beginning to drop significantly. I was told earlier today, I think there was 2 ships that were able to transit today. I think one of them was at least an Iranian vessel, by the way. So we're seeing certainly the energy sector really begin to shut down again as a result of this. And we needed this to be open. We needed this to be open 4 months ago. The necessary feedstock, the petroleum products, all the other commodities that come out of that region needed to get to where they were going. They need to get there soon. And by the way, just because the Strait opens up, 2 weeks ago, doesn't mean everything just gets there in a flash. It takes roughly 2 months to get to the west coast of the United States from the Persian Gulf. So what left 2 weeks ago will take 2 months to get there. So things needed to get up and moving. And we decided, I guess, to restart this for whatever reason Trump decided at the last moment, because that's the way this has been operating. The off-ramp is over, ladies and gentlemen. It's over. It's over. There is no off-ramp anymore. And I say this to you not because I want the U.S. to lose or anything like that. I'm giving you just the hard facts. The off-ramp is done. We have blown it. And as a result of this next part will startle you, but I've kind of prepped you for this in the past. This is coming from Fars News Agency. This is what they've said. They said in the future confrontation, options such as withdrawing from the Non-Proliferation Treaty, changing the nuclear doctrine, and closing the Bab el-Mandeb Strait alongside the Strait of Hormuz will be under consideration. Now, can you imagine if they close the Bab el-Mandeb Strait on the other side of the Arabian Peninsula? That's really going to affect, obviously, the Saudis and the Egyptians for sure, and affect their economies, absolutely. That waterway is now shut down. But listen to this. The bill to withdraw from the Non-Proliferation Treaty is also ready for review in Parliament. What did I tell you a couple weeks ago? I had people tell me, Gerace, you're full of it. You're hearing nonsense. Why are you telling us this, Gerace? Come on, Gerace, what do you do? Okay. What did I tell you my source said? This was coming through people I follow who are well connected, that get information directly from people on the Pakistani side. And they said 3 things. Do you remember what they were? I told you this a couple weeks ago. I wasn't sure I wanted to share it because it wasn't set in stone, but I said this was a possibility. This could happen if things don't go well with these negotiations. Number 1, that the Iranians would leave the negotiations 100%. They would completely withdraw. That seems to be very possible now at this point. The next thing I said to you was that the Iranians would then rescind their membership in the Non-Proliferation Treaty. In other words, they would get out of it. They would withdraw from that as well. And what was the third thing I told you? If they decide to go through with that, then there is absolutely nothing in any sort of legal binding that would stop them from developing, acquiring a nuclear weapon, and demonstrating that they have access to one. That would be phase 3. So if this withdrawal does take place, and that's, again, a big if, they're considering it right now, that's at least what they're telling us out in the open, they could already be deciding themselves, hey, we're done with this. Every time we negotiate with the United States, we sign our name to paper, we meet with them. The United States then decides to circumvent our coordination with these ships and telling ships where they should go after we're telling them, no, you'll follow what we say. It's in writing that we'll control this. Now we have the U.S. involved in this. We try to deter these ships just to let them know what is going to happen if you decide to continue to not listen to us. And now we're getting attacked in various sites. We're seeing Chabahar get hit. We're seeing the Bashir nuclear facility getting hit. We're seeing parts of the Iranian coastline getting hit. We're seeing our transportation sectors, the transportation routes getting hit now because the United States is ignoring the memorandum of understanding. It's right there, folks. So when J.D. Vance and Trump get out and say, well, look what they've decided to do. They've totally not followed the memorandum of understanding. I said, did they even read this? I got to be honest with you. Did they even read it? It certainly doesn't sound like it. I read it. I read through it. I read it to you on the show. All of the arrangements to transit the Strait will be done by the Iranians. Didn't say by the Iranians and the United States. Didn't say if the Iranians decide to hit a vessel, the U.S. could come in and start attacking them again. None of that was in there. And by the way, the war would obviously resume at some point anyways because, again, Israel's continuing to attack inside of southern Lebanon, even though we aren't hearing about it as much. I reported to you just yesterday there were still attacks going on. And so long as that goes on, there is no real memorandum of understanding. There's no progression in these negotiations. So we find ourselves in this awful situation, folks, because, once again, Trump has decided not to go with his word. I know you're hearing the Iranians went against their word, but really, folks, if you actually look at it, actually look at the data and the facts, it is the U.S. that came in and did this. And it says it right here in this article. And I'm shocked the BBC would even publish something like that. But you can't get away from the facts, folks. The U.S. had no right to go in and do that. There was no reason to then go in and start bombing them. They didn't sink a vessel. They didn't start killing people. It's not like they just started bombing ships in the Persian Gulf or ships that had permission to transit. That's a complete different situation. None of that had to happen. But we, again, had to go in and destroy it. And for what reason? I guess only President Trump knows. I can't see a rational reason as to why anybody would go ahead and do this. And by the way, if you think I'm just overstating or overestimating the extent of what's happening now with our economy, take a listen to this. This comes from out of the Hill. And it says, ladies and gentlemen, just again, so we understand where we stand, it said the global economy is on track for a sharp downward trajectory. This is the global economy, not just the U.S. economy, not the European economy, the Asian economy, the Iranian economy. This is the global economy. This is coming right from the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. This is what they published just Wednesday. And it said global growth is now projected to decline from 3.5% in 2025 down to 3% in 2026. That's a lot. That's a half percentage point for the global economy. That's a lot of commerce not there anymore. They estimate that should things resume in 2027, it should go back up to 3.4%. Again, this is according to a July update from the organization's World Economic Outlook. Well, if this war continues on, folks, if things don't get to where they need to go, you can expect that number to continue to stay down. If this becomes a forever war, which, by the way, President Trump said he would not get us in. And don't give me this BS that the Iranians had a nuclear weapon, they're going to use it against us, they chant death to America in the streets. Yeah, they chant death to America, to our government. The American government is what they hate. They don't just hate American people. Let's put the facts where they are. They hate the American government because look what the American government does to them. They fought an 8-year war against the Iraqis because of the United States. They have these crippling sanctions on their economy, again, because of the United States. Their supreme leader was just assassinated, so everybody could see it, over lies of which they have a nuclear weapon, which they don't have. Certainly not yet, at least. Let's pray to God that doesn't happen. So for all the people that say, well, geez, we don't want a nuclear-armed Iran. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the wrong way to go about it. Because now you're putting them in a position where they're saying, listen, anything we do with the United States is not being met with any sort of faith or honesty. Every time we sit down with them, we get attacked again. This is the third time now. We've now hit them a third time, really, when you think about it. We've now restarted this war. We've attacked them on their mainland. We're attacking transportation sites. During the funeral of the Ayatollah, which people are in the streets grieving about this, again, we can criticize the Iranian government, their way of life, all you want. That doesn't make killing a world leader certainly not legal, I would have to say. Just taking out a world leader like that? We've totally lost any semblance of international law when we go ahead and do things like this. And it leads to nothing productive. Nothing at all. What we have done is just simply radicalized a new group of young Iranians. And they are standing with their government. I tell it to you how it is, folks. This is what I'm seeing in the streets. I'm seeing people from the U.S., they are with their cell phones showing the information that this is what the Iranian people want. They support their government. Now more than ever, by the way. They were supporting them before this war began, but now it's increasing, the support, because they see exactly what the U.S., what Israel want to do with the Iranians. And then you get Trump saying, we'll wipe you off the face of this earth. None of this is positive. Can you imagine if there was a foreign government out there saying, death to him, we're going to, we've killed the president, and now we're going to go in and wipe all of them off the face of this earth? How would we respond to this? Of course you would respond in the way of which the Iranians are responding. God forbid that were ever to happen. And I pray to God that never happens in the United States. But we've got to look at our actions too, folks. What are we doing? What is the purpose of this? What do we plan to gain from this? We're not going to get a safer Iran. We're not going to get a more cooperative Iran if we're acting like this. We sat down with them twice during negotiations, planning for more negotiations, and in between, we've decided to go in and bomb them. They make up whatever ridiculous excuse they want for it. Well, the Iranians were taking too long. That was the first thing. We could have had a perfectly fine deal last June. It would have been great. We could have avoided this entire war. But then we let Netanyahu go in and start bombing the country. Totally destroys any sense of negotiations. The Iranians meet with us again. This is after we tried to devalue the Iranian rial. We did it again. And this time we assassinated their supreme leader, the head Islamic cleric of the country, the top governmental position. We took that person out. We martyred the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And now you're seeing people in the streets very upset about this, just like you would see people upset in the streets if something were to happen like that in the United States. So if you want to get people to rally behind a cause against the United States and Israel, this is it. This is it right now. So this is all foolish from the start. We could have had a great deal. President Trump had a great deal worked out last June, and he decided to let Netanyahu do whatever the hell he wanted to do. There was no reason to go bomb last June. They were not 2 weeks away from building anything. Our own intelligence tells us this. So this idea that we need to be fearful again of global terrorism, that the Iranians are coming to attack us, or this and that, we have to stop this. We have to stop this right now. Because this is leading to a more unstable U.S. economy. Certainly it's definitely affecting our position globally as time goes on. No one is going to be getting at all to trust President Trump moving forward. It's just simply not going to happen. And by the way, I want to play you one more clip from President Trump. This is a short one as well. Again, this time on Air Force One yesterday. Let's take a listen to clip 3.
There are many ways we can win, but we've already won militarily. They have very little. They have very little left, and they want to make a deal so badly. They called a little while ago. They want to make a deal so badly. I just don't know if they're worthy of making a deal. I don't know that they're going to honor the deal. That's the problem.
That's amazing, since we've never honored any deal with the Iranians our own selves. We've totally violated the Memorandum of Understanding. We committed perfidy in the last 2 rounds of negotiations with them. One that's now led to a war inside their country. That's killed innocent civilians in the process. 168 school children, schoolgirls. How would we respond if that were to happen in the United States from any country? How would we respond if an elementary school was hit with a Tomahawk missile and killed 168 elementary age school children? We would be beyond pissed, and rightfully so. This has got to stop, folks. And again, the idea that we've won militarily, we've defeated them militarily, okay, well then how are they attacking us still? How are they still striking us all throughout the region? And by the way, I'll tell you this. I'll end on this note with Iran. What I have been told by my sources, I've been told, for instance, the ability of the Iranians, in which their arsenal is, their advanced arsenal, we have not seen the entirety of it yet. So in other words, they have more advanced technology that they have not yet even begun to use. I want you to think about that for a second. I know we've been told, oh, they have like 21% of their stockpiles left. Completely not true. Their own estimation says they have about 80% left. That's at least what their government is telling us. But they haven't even begun to use some of their more advanced weaponry yet. Things that we have not yet to see. And I pray to God we do not see it. And I'm very worried about this idea of sending troops to Kark Island, or even the idea of taking Kark Island. We can expect possibly Marines getting killed. Again, it hugs the coastline of Iran. Or it could be even worse. Well, obviously that would be the worst thing, of course, if our men, young brave men, were killed if we decided to put them on Kark Island. But if, for instance, if they took them hostage, my God, how awful would that be? Both scenarios are horrible, of course. But can you imagine if the Iranians actually took some 10,000 U.S. Marines as now hostages in this war? I can't, again, it'd be horrible. I didn't want to think about it. But that would just be a grave misstep. And you're seeing some of the people on the right talking about, let's take Kark Island. What would we benefit from taking Kark Island? Can anyone explain that? We know they have other means for routes of moving oil. And by the way, that's not their only oil terminal of which ships come in and fill up their vessels with before they sail. They have other areas all around the Persian Gulf of which they can do that. Kark Island just happens to be the largest one. So please spare me the idea of taking Kark Island. We'll do anything but put our brave young Marines in harm's way. Let's not do that, President Trump. Please, let's not do that. Nobody wants to see this. Just stop, please. My God. And on that note, folks, I don't think I have anything more I really want to share with you today. I think I've told you everything I need to regarding what's taking place. Just know I expect everything to continue to uptick as time goes on. All right, let's move on, folks. Trump also was meeting with NATO yesterday. I didn't see anything beneficial coming from this. We saw lots of finger pointing yesterday, of course. The meetings in Ankara was really meant to be a show of strength and unity, but again, President Trump seemed to derail the two-day event with rage-filled remarks and simultaneously igniting this war again in the Middle East, which I guess Mark Rutte was more than ecstatic about. I don't know why. But there it was. Trump did not hold back any of his frustration, certainly in NATO, saying that several member countries had not treated the U.S. correctly, certainly calling out France and Germany and Italy and the UK specifically. And then he went on this kind of tirade against Spain, which again, I didn't really understand where all that was coming from. He also referred to Greenland as a very big problem because I guess in Trump's mind, having Greenland would be something for national security purposes. I don't see what that is all about. Maybe he wants it for natural resources. I don't know. Maybe there's coal in Greenland that he wants access to. I really don't understand what he would want with Greenland. How would we even go about acquiring it if the Danish don't want to sell it? But even if they did sell it to us, it'd be somewhere around $700 billion, I'm told. Where are we going to get this money from? Seriously, where are we going to get this money from to purchase Greenland? And then what would we do with it? Then we'd have to invest in Greenland. If we're going to build bases in Greenland and what have you, that's all going to cost more money. What about the over $100 billion now that we would have to now spend if the Persian Gulf Arab states decided to let us come back in, which I believe many of them, like Saudi Arabia and Qatar, have really had enough here and have said, we want these bases closed. You got about 6 to 9 months. We want these bases closed. We want you out of here. That's going to be our new relationship in the Persian Gulf, which I think the Iranians know is happening. And why they realize the more they hit these bases, the Iranians understand this, by the way. Iran knows all they have to do is really stay intact. They don't have to really sink a ship or do any damage, certainly not in the United States. There's nothing they have to gain access to. All they have to do is withhold the U.S. missile capacity, which is dwindling day by day. And so he took the time at the NATO summit now to, I guess, declare that the ceasefire now is officially over, calling the regime scum, as I demonstrated to you in our audio clips. But now he's going after Greenland. He's going after Spain, saying we're going to shut off all trade with Spain all of a sudden. Again, I don't understand why we're doing that. Really, I saw nothing of any value coming from this. There was no highlights. There was no good moment. He went on to say, I'm not happy with NATO because of what they did with Greenland. Again, the idea that we go in and just say, we want this land, give it to us, really, to me, is foolish, especially when the people that live in Greenland themselves say, we don't want to be a part of the United States. So there's that. Okay. So the Iranian part was the biggest moment. Again, I didn't understand the cutting off trade with Spain, or if that's even going to happen. He went on this tirade saying, I don't want anything to do with Spain. Cut off all trade with Spain. He said this to someone that was off camera. I don't even know who he was speaking to. Maybe he didn't even know who he was speaking to. I have no idea. But further saying, we don't want to do any business with Spain anymore. By the way, I'd like to cut it off. Okay. I guess we're cutting off trade with Spain, folks. I don't know. There we go. Then he went on a late night Truth Social spree as well, 16 times talking about what was taking place during the meetings, certainly reiterating what was happening with the Iranians. I got to be honest with you, folks. I don't know what is going on here. I think we should just leave NATO in particular. There's really no benefit to us of staying in it, and Trump has really damaged a lot of these relationships with these countries as of right now. Again, once the Warsaw Pact ended in 1991, when the old Soviet Union fell, that was the time to end NATO. Let Spain, let Italy, let Germany, let the UK, let France, let all these other countries worry about their own national security defense. Let's stop throwing money to all these countries, by the way, of whom since 1991 have never been invaded. The only country of NATO that's been invaded was the United States during September 11th, 2001. That was it. That was it. That was the last time any NATO country was ever attacked by anybody else. So let's get out of NATO once and for all. Let's just stop this. There's no reason for us to be in it. There's no reason for us to continue to spend money for it. Let these other countries spend their own money. They can do it themselves. Yes, let's be allies with these countries, but let's work on free trade. But there's no reason for us to continue to pay for other countries' military budgets. And by the way, same thing goes with the foreign aid. That's just my position, folks. Let's just end it. There's nothing beneficial to it. Which brings me to my next point, though. This brings me to my next point. This article comes from Paul Craig Roberts. I've been on a Paul Craig Roberts kick lately. I don't know what it is. The guy writes just brilliantly, and I like what he has to say. This is my stance, too. And what he says in today's article. He says, Dear American, no one in government represents you. He's absolutely right. Now, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massey, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, a few others have access to media exposure, including Paul Craig Roberts, by the way. But they all agree that Washington does not represent the American people anymore. Neither do the state and local governments themselves. It's a get-rich-quick scheme. That's really what it comes down to. Now, conservatives used to claim that the closer government is to you, the better it represents you. But that's really not the case anymore. Marjorie Taylor Greene herself correctly stated that you cannot go against the party position of the establishment, or they will come after you. Look what happened to her. Look what happened to Thomas Massey. Thomas Massey got kicked out because he was opposing what was happening with Israel and questioning that relationship. That's all he was doing. And they decided to throw in tens of millions of dollars to this Ed Gallery guy that nobody's ever heard of, that has the enthusiasm of a dead moth. And all of a sudden he became more popular than Thomas Massey. Go figure, folks. Go figure. But the money interests that finance the elections are the ones that benefit from the government. So again, the AIPAC loves it, right? They get their candidates in office. They get the proper legislation. They get $3.8 billion every single year just to the Israeli military. I mean, it's brilliant. And of course, the big money interest inside the United States, too, that fund their people. It all makes sense. But she's right. She's right. But when she's saying that, go with the party or the party will come after you. That's really how it functions now. Now, of course, there has been talks of, for instance, a third party coming into motion here. I think that's the wrong step, absolutely, because, these third parties never really make things out. It'd be one thing if you were replacing the Republican Party with something else. That's something totally different. Like, for instance, when we saw the Whig Party turn into the Republican Party in the mid-1850s, that's something totally different. But right now, if we were to try to do something like that, you're just pulling people away from the Republican ticket and you're handing a win to the Democrats. What did I tell you before? The Democratic Socialists of America, who are really communists through and through, they hate this country. They're just taking over the Democratic Party. They're not making a new party because there's no win in that. If they can infiltrate the Democratic Party, which they've done very successfully, by the way, and they start to win seats and gain momentum, they'll begin to get more and more of what they want. They'll be able to get more access to money and more clout. And then they get more seats. And they campaign for one another. They canvass for one another. And then all of a sudden, the Democratic Party is really nothing more than the American Communist Party. That's all it really is. Led by the great Bernie Sanders. Old Bernie. There you go. Old Bernie. Loves it. Loves it. And this is where we are, though. So we have to move forward and say, okay, if we're going to have any type of movement on the right, it has to be within the Republican Party. That's the smart way about going about it. And then over time, if that party wants to completely rebrand itself with another name, okay, fine. That's one thing. But, these third parties that exist, yeah, they get some momentum at some times in history. We saw it with Ross Perot in the 90s. But what did that do? It just split the ticket, so it gave access to Billy Clinton. Good old Billy Clinton. And what did Bill Clinton do? All the wrong things in this country. A lot of the problems we have today is because of what Bill Clinton did. He moved away from what Reagan was doing. Go figure. And then the genius of Bill Clinton inviting China into the World Trade Organization, that was the final nail in the coffin for the U.S. economy, certainly for the manufacturing, which was greatly outsourced to countries just like China. Anyways, where does this leave us now, though? Now, he goes on to talk about his position in the Reagan government and, of course, the reduction in tax rates, which he championed, of course. This is all the genius of Paul Craig Roberts. But this was exactly what Reagan did. Reagan was really an outsider, if you really think about it. Reagan was an outsider. And as a result of this, Paul Craig Roberts was able to write the necessary tax codes and the income tax brackets adjusted for the inflation at the time that they were faced with in order to prevent further inflation from pushing down the nominal incomes into higher tax brackets. This is positive. But this comes from a Reagan-esque. It doesn't come from anybody else. Certainly not the Bushes. Now, Trump has done things with tax cuts, but certainly not to the degree of which the Reagan administration did that. And had Paul Craig Roberts not succeeded, Every American taxpayer today would be in the top 50% bracket of financing their work and their income of America's wars for the Zionist agenda of which we find ourselves in today. Shocking? Not really. Now, today there is no such people with the necessary support to bring any real change, certainly not approved by the controlling interest groups in this country. I think everyone would agree with me on that, and Paul Craig Roberts writes about that. But as President Trump has demonstrated, the real change in America is no longer possible within the existing party confines. It's either you're MAGA or we're going to kick you out of the party. That's the way they've made it work. So in other words, there's no thought in the Congress. It's our way, the establishment's way, or it's the highway. Two can't exist at the same time. So the party confines are changing. Again, you're seeing the Democrats taken over by what's taking place with the Democratic Socialists, and they're now very anti-Israel. The Republican MAGA voters, again, the ones of us that have been disappointed with Trump's forsaken promise of no new wars, are losing enthusiasm in the party. By the way, all the independents too, the anti-war independents who want a smaller government, they're out, by the way, just in case you didn't know that. So where does this leave us? So now we have the Democrats for the immigrant invaders of which come into the country, which they want legalized, not deported. By the way, both parties really do this. We haven't seen the mass deportations under Trump, of which he promised us as well. And Trump's failure to do this will only further demoralize Americans and undermine the belief that America can be restored. And Trump ran in a great campaign platform back in 2015 and 2016. It was brilliant. It's what got me involved in politics. But we're totally abandoning that platform and those promises. He said on day one, we would be ending the war with Ukraine and Russia. It'd be over with. He'd get that done on day one. We said, this is the guy to do it. It's not going to come from Joe Biden, who's been throwing money at them time and time again. Not going to happen. And now we're on what? Day 535 of this administration, if I'm reading this correctly. And what did we do yesterday? We just promised to give them the ability to take our patents to create their own Patriot missiles. Our own Patriot missiles. We're going to give them our technology. A country that's not even in NATO, a country of which we have no stake in, we're going to allow them to create Patriot missiles of our own. Make it make sense, folks. Please make it make sense. And of course, we see the war in Gaza going on, the war now in Lebanon going on. The Board of Peace is completely obsolete and was always intended to be so. And now we're in a war with Iran, of which Trump said we would not be fighting any more forever wars. So there you go, folks. That's the way it's all working out right here in the United States. Oh, by the way, I just want to say this too. We have a few moments remaining in today's program, and I didn't get through all my articles today. Unfortunately, we'll finish up tomorrow, hopefully, on our Friday program. But Graham Platner is out, right? Who didn't see that one coming? Graham went splatter. That's the way he'll always be remembered, if he's remembered at all. But now they're already looking for new ways of which to replace him. This seems to be the route of which they want to go on. And now they have a Maine state representative, Valli, I guess it's Geiger. She's a Rockland Democrat, a former nurse and former mayor, now is silly just being thrusted out into national attention. This comes from Fox News after Graham Platner has decided to call it quits over the sexual assault allegations of rape, of course. Yeah, that looks awful on him, and probably the right thing to do. And I think he sees that likely what's going to happen is more women are going to be coming forward and accusing him of other things, more damning things that's really going to push him underwater. Susan Collins is gaining ground here, and it's probably likely going to be her race in the end anyway. So Graham Platner is out. The Democrats will now choose who they would like to be the representative in the state of Maine, and we'll see how things fall in that race as time goes on. All right, folks, I'm out of time. Thank you again for being here as always. Make sure you're always staying prepped with food, water, medicine, fuel, money, tools, anything. You need to be self-sufficient. Please do so sooner rather than later. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you back here tomorrow for more groundbreaking news on the next Marco Dre Show. Until next time, be good, stay busy. God bless.